Snow fell softly against the window of the Winter Rose, the city's most exclusive restaurant, transforming the Christmas Eve scene into something from a storybook. But Michael Preston barely noticed. He sat alone at a table meant for one, a glass of wine untouched beside him, staring at the small candle flickering in its holder, as if it might hold answers to questions he was afraid to ask. At 41, Michael was the CEO of Preston Technologies, a self-made millionaire who'd built his company from nothing into a tech empire. Forbes had featured him. Business magazines praised his vision. His penthouse apartment overlooked the city from the 65th floor. He had everything society said he should want. And he had never felt more alone in his life. Christmas Eve. Families everywhere were gathering, opening presents, sharing meals, creating memories. Michael was sitting in an expensive restaurant, because the alternative was sitting in his empty penthouse, and at least here the loneliness felt intentional rather than pathetic. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Preston. The contracts you requested are on your desk for review tomorrow." Tomorrow. Christmas Day. And his assistant assumed he'd be working. She was probably right. Michael set down his phone and looked around the restaurant. Most tables were occupied by couples or families, their laughter and conversation creating a warm buzz that only highlighted his isolation. The table beside him was set for four, white tablecloth, festive centerpiece, four-place settings gleaming in the candlelight. Reserved, the small card indicated, for the Morrison party. He wondered idly what the Morrison party would be like. Probably a perfect family, successful parents, accomplished children, the kind of unit that made holidays feel magical instead of hollow, the kind of family Michael had thought he'd have by now. His ex-wife Rachel had left 3 years ago, tired of being married to someone who loved his work more than he loved her. She hadn't been entirely wrong. Michael had poured everything into building his company, convinced that success would bring happiness. By the time he'd realized his mistake, Rachel had already moved on, remarried, started the family she'd always wanted with someone who actually came, home before midnight. "Excuse me, sir?" A small voice interrupted his thoughts. Michael looked up to find a little girl standing beside his table. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, with dark curly hair and bright eyes, wearing a red coat that was slightly too large for her. Behind her stood an identical twin, equally small, equally curious. "Yes?" Michael managed, startled. "Are you sad?" the first girl asked with the directness only children possess. "You look really sad." "It's Christmas Eve. Nobody should be sad on Christmas Eve." "Lily, Maya, come back here." A woman's voice, warm but stressed, called from near the entrance. Michael looked up to see a young woman in a green coat approaching, her expression apologetic and exhausted in equal measure. She wore simple clothes, nice, but clearly not expensive, and carried herself with the kind of weariness that spoke of too many responsibilities on too little sleep. "I'm so sorry," the woman said, reaching the twins and gently taking their hands. "They got away from me. We're just waiting for our table. Girls, you can't bother people." "We're not bothering," Lily, or was it Maya, protested. "We're helping." He's sad. Michael found himself smiling despite everything. "It's all right. They're not bothering me." The woman, she must be the Morrison party, Michael realized, looked at him properly for the first time. Her eyes were kind but guarded, the look of someone who'd learned to be cautious. "Still, I apologize. It's been a long day and they're excited about dinner out. We don't do this often." "Morrison party?" the hostess called from the front. "That's us," the woman said, relief evident in her voice. Then she paused, looking at the empty tables in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I made a reservation for 3. "Table for 3? The hostess checked her tablet, and Michael saw her expression shift to professional regret. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Morrison. There seems to have been a system error. Your reservation was entered for 4, and we gave away your table for 3 thinking you hadn't arrived. The only tables we have left are for 4 or more, and they're all reserved for other parties." The color drained from the woman's face. "But I confirmed this morning. I told them specifically 3 people. It's Christmas Eve. I promised my daughters." "I understand, and I sincerely apologize," the hostess said, clearly uncomfortable. "I can put you on the waiting list, but it may be 2 hours or more." Michael watched the woman's shoulders sag. He saw her glance at her daughters, saw them looking up at her with such trust, such excitement. He saw her trying to figure out what to do, how to fix this, how to not disappoint them on Christmas Eve. Before he could think better of it, Michael spoke up. "Excuse me?" Everyone turned to look at him. "I have a table," Michael said, standing. "Well, I have a seat at a table, but the table beside me is set for 4 and appears to be unreserved now. If the restaurant would allow it, perhaps we could combine the tables. I'm dining alone anyway." The hostess looked uncertain. "Sir, that table is reserved for the Morrison party?" "We are the Morrison party," the woman said quickly, understanding dawning. "This is my family. One of our party couldn't make it." It was clearly a lie, but a kind one, and the hostess chose not to challenge it. "Of course. Let me just rearrange the tables for you." Minutes later, Michael found himself seated at a table for 4 with 3 strangers, Sarah Morrison and her twin daughters, Lily and Maya. The girls had claimed the seats on either side of him with the confidence of children who hadn't yet learned about social awkwardness. Sarah sat across from him, still looking slightly stunned. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to do that. We could have found somewhere else." "On Christmas Eve?" "Everything decent is booked solid," Michael replied. "Besides, I was sitting alone anyway." "This is nice." It was true. Already the oppressive loneliness that had been crushing him felt lighter. The twins were chattering about Christmas, about the snow, about everything and nothing, their joy infectious. "Are you really sad?" Maya asked, picking up her earlier question. "Lily said you looked sad." "Maya," Sarah admonished gently, but Michael shook his head. "It's okay," he said. He looked at Maya seriously. "I was a bit sad, yes. Sometimes grown-ups get sad, especially on holidays." "Why?" Lily asked. "Holidays are supposed to be happy." "They are," Michael agreed. "But sometimes when you're alone, even happy occasions can make you feel lonely." "You're not alone now," Maya pointed out with irrefutable child logic. "You're with us." Michael felt something crack in his chest. "You're right. I'm not alone now." As they ordered dinner, Michael insisting on covering the bill despite Sarah's protests, he learned their story in pieces. Sarah was a single mother, working as a nurse at the children's hospital. The twins' father had left when they were babies, and she'd been raising them alone for 6 years. Money was tight, and dinner at the Winter Rose was a splurge she'd saved for months to afford, wanting to give her daughters one magical Christmas memory. "I feel terrible that you're paying," Sarah said as the appetizers arrived. "This was supposed to be my treat for the girls." "Consider it my thank you," Michael replied. "You've given me something I didn't realize I needed tonight, company. That's worth far more than a meal." The twins were delightful dinner companions. They told Michael about their school, their favorite books, their plans for Christmas morning. They asked him questions about everything: where he lived, what he did for work, whether he had any pets. He didn't, though Maya insisted he should get a dog because everybody needs a dog. Sarah watched her daughters with such love it made Michael's heart ache. This was what he'd been missing, what he'd sacrificed while building his empire. Not just a family in the abstract, but these small moments, shared meals, silly conversations, the feeling of being part of something larger than himself. "What do you do?" Sarah asked him during a lull in the twins' chatter. "I run a technology company," Michael said, deliberately understating it. "Software development mostly. It keeps me busy." "Too busy?" Sarah asked gently, and Michael realized she'd seen more than he'd intended to show. "Yes," he admitted. "Too busy. For too long. I thought if I just worked hard enough, was successful enough, everything else would fall into place. Turns out that's not how life works." "No," Sarah agreed softly. "It's not. I learned that lesson differently, but I learned it too. For a while after their father left, I thought if I just worked enough hours, saved enough money, gave them enough things, I could make up for what they'd lost. But they didn't need more things. They needed me, present, available, there for the ordinary moments." "How did you figure that out?" Sarah smiled. "Lily told me. She was 4 years old, and I'd just worked a double shift, so I could afford a fancy birthday party for them. I came home exhausted, and she climbed into my lap and said, 'Mama, I don't need a party. I just need you to play with me.' 4 years old, and she understood what I'd forgotten. The dinner continued, and Michael found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. The twins demanded his attention for their stories, asked his opinion on important matters like whether chocolate or vanilla was the superior ice cream flavor, and made him laugh with their observations about the world. As dessert arrived, chocolate cake that the twins approached with reverent excitement, Maya suddenly turned to Michael. "Do you have a family?" "Maya," Sarah said, "that's a personal question." "It's okay," Michael said. He looked at Maya seriously. "I don't know. I used to be married, but that ended, and I don't have children." "Why not?" Lily asked. "I was too focused on work," Michael said honestly. "I thought I had time to build a family later, after I'd achieved success. But I spent so long working that I forgot to build the rest of my life." "That's sad," Maya said matter-of-factly. "Very sad," Lily agreed. Then she brightened. "But you could start now. You're not that old. Our teacher, Miss Robinson, is really old. She's like 40, and she just got married." Sarah nearly choked on her water. "Lily, 40 is not old, and you can't just tell people to get married." "Why not?" Lily asked. "He's lonely, and being lonely is bad. He should find someone who makes him happy. Like you, Mama, you make us happy." Michael and Sarah's eyes met across the table, and they both smiled at the guileless wisdom of children. As the evening wound down and other diners began to leave, heading home to their families and their traditions, Michael felt a profound reluctance to let this moment end. For 3 hours, he'd been part of something, not a business deal or a board meeting, but a real human connection. He'd laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. He'd felt useful and needed and welcome, not because of his success or his money, but just because he was there, present, engaged. "Thank you," he said as they prepared to leave, "for letting me join your Christmas Eve. You've given me something incredibly precious." "Thank you for saving our dinner," Sarah replied, "and for being so kind to the girls." Outside, snow was falling more heavily now, and Sarah struggled with her coat while trying to manage 2 excited 6-year-olds. Michael helped bundle the twins into their coats, smiling as they chattered about the snow. "Can we see you again?" Maya asked suddenly. "You're nice. We like you." Sarah looked mortified. "Girls, Mr. Preston is very busy." "Michael," he corrected. "And actually, I'd really like that. If it's okay with your mom." Sarah looked at him searchingly, perhaps looking for ulterior motives or hidden agendas. But whatever she saw in his face must have reassured her, because she nodded slowly. "The girls have a Christmas pageant at their school on New Year's Day. It's just a little thing, but you'd be welcome to come, if you wanted." "I'd love to," Michael said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised him. They exchanged contact information, and as Sarah and the twins headed toward the subway, Maya turned back and waved enthusiastically. "See you at the pageant, Mr. Michael." Michael stood in the falling snow watching them go, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Not the kind of hope that came from a successful quarter or a lucrative deal, but the kind that came from human connection, from the possibility of building something real. He spent Christmas Day not working, but thinking about the life he'd built and the life he actually wanted. Thinking about Sarah's quiet strength and her daughter's joyful energy. Thinking about how a chance encounter on Christmas Eve had shown him what he'd been missing. The New Year's pageant was held in a small elementary school auditorium, crowded with proud parents armed with cameras. Michael sat in the back, feeling out of place in his expensive coat among the casual-dressed families. But when Lily and Maya appeared on stage, dressed as angels in slightly crooked halos, and spotted him in the audience, their faces lit up with such genuine happiness that every eye in his vicinity turned to see who had inspired such a reaction. After the pageant, Sarah approached him with coffee and a shy smile. "You came." "I said I would," Michael replied. "They were wonderful. Very angelic." Sarah laughed. "If you think they're angelic, you haven't seen them fighting over toys. But thank you for coming. It meant a lot to them and to me." Over the following months, Michael became a regular part of their lives. Not as a benefactor or a savior, but as a friend who genuinely enjoyed their company. He attended school events, helped with homework, discovering he'd forgotten most of third-grade math, and learned the intricate rules of various playground games. He cut his work hours dramatically, delegating responsibilities he'd always hoarded, trusting his team in ways he'd never allowed himself before. And he discovered something revolutionary. The company didn't fall apart. In fact, with better work-life balance, his decision-making improved. Sarah resisted his help for a long time. She'd built a life on self-sufficiency and wasn't comfortable accepting assistance. But slowly she learned to let him in, not as a replacement for what the twins had lost, but as something new, something unexpected. They fell in love slowly, carefully, two people who'd both been hurt before and were determined not to rush into anything. They talked for hours after the twins were asleep, sharing their fears and dreams and the wounds they'd accumulated along the way. 2 years after that Christmas Eve, Michael knelt down in front of Lily and Maya before proposing to Sarah. "I'd like to ask your mom to marry me," he said seriously. "But this decision affects all three of you. And I won't do it if you're not comfortable. I'm not trying to replace your father. I'm just asking if you'd be okay with me being part of your family officially." Lily and Maya exchanged one of their twin looks, that wordless communication that still amazed Michael. Then Lily spoke for both of them. "Will you still be sad sometimes?" "Because Mama said everybody gets sad sometimes, even when they're happy." "Probably," Michael admitted. "Life has sad moments. But with you three, I'll never be lonely again. And that's what matters most." "Then yes," Maya said decisively. "You can marry Mama, but you have to keep coming to our school stuff. And you still owe us that dog you promised." "I never promised a dog," Michael protested, laughing. "You will," Lily said with absolute confidence. They were right. 6 months after the wedding, they adopted a golden retriever puppy that the twins named Christmas, in honor of the night they'd first met Michael. The wedding itself was small, just close friends and family, held in the same restaurant where they'd first shared a table. Michael had bought the Winter Rose the year before, partly as an investment, but mostly because he couldn't bear the thought of it closing. He'd kept the same staff, the same menu, the same warm atmosphere that had witnessed the beginning of his new life. During the reception, Michael stood and raised his glass. 3 years ago, I sat alone in this restaurant on Christmas Eve, convinced I'd missed my chance at happiness. I'd built a successful career but an empty life. And then 3 people walked in, a tired mother and 2 curious little girls, and everything changed. He looked at Sarah, at Lily and Maya. "You saved me that night. Not from financial ruin or professional failure, but from a loneliness so deep, I didn't even recognize it anymore. You reminded me what matters. Not quarterly profits or business deals, but moments, shared meals, silly conversations, being present for the people you love." Sarah had tears in her eyes. The twins were grinning, proud to be part of the story. "I'm the luckiest man alive," Michael continued. "Not because of my company or my bank account, but because I get to come home to you 3 every night. Because I get to be part of your family, your chaos, your love. Thank you for letting a sad millionaire join your table on Christmas Eve. Thank you for changing my life." Years later, when Michael told the story of how they met, and he told it often, to anyone who would listen, people would marvel at the coincidence. What were the odds that a reservation error would put them all in the same place at the same time? What were the chances that he'd speak up instead of staying silent? But Michael didn't believe in coincidences anymore. He believed in moments of choice, in the courage to reach out, in the transformative power of human connection. He believed that sometimes the most important meetings in our lives happen because we're brave enough to be vulnerable, to admit we're lonely, to share a table with strangers who become family. Every Christmas Eve, they returned to the Winter Rose, now with 2 more children, a dog, and sometimes various extended family members. But they always requested that same table, the one where a sad millionaire had dined, alone until a single mother and her twin daughters arrived, and taught him that the best gifts can't be bought, only shared. And every year, without fail, Maya would remind him, "Remember when you were sad on Christmas Eve? You're not sad anymore, right?" "Not anymore," Michael would reply, pulling all his children close. "Not ever again," because he'd learned the lesson that changed everything. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. But love, real, messy, chaotic, beautiful love, makes even the ordinary moments extraordinary. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.